as it pertains to leaving your church, I think that this is multi-layered. I don't think that it's necessarily one size fits all. Some of us are actually called to be revolutionists. What do I mean by that? Some of us are actually called to basically bring forth truth in the midst of corruption. You got to know exactly what you're called to. Some of us are called to be at a healthy space where we got to leave toxicity alone and literally find a safe haven for our well-being and for our family's well-being. Especially as a father, if you're a man, you got a responsibility to shield your family from things that are not of God. That's if you have a family. If you don't, you have the responsibility to protect yourself, to protect your mind, to protect your sanity, to protect your peace. So you got to understand exactly where you're at. I also believe that you got to understand, you got to know the vision of the church, where they're going, what they're looking at, where they want to be. And do you see yourself where they see themselves years from now? And when you have this conversation with the pastor or with the group of pastors or however the leadership is set up in your church, that's where it starts, right? With just honest conversation. One of the mistakes I made when it came down to a few of the churches that I stepped away from was not having conversations, right? And allowing the pastoral team to basically make adjustments. So if you believe that you are in the right in terms of how you view things or how you see things and how you see how things ought to be, for example, if the pastor, the man of God, is not treating the word of God the way the word of God ought to be treated or taught or preached, and you come to kind of, bring some constructive criticism or some type of, correction. And if that particular person or that committee decides to basically push you aside, maybe that may be a green light for you to exit and to look elsewhere, because obviously that may not be a place where you could see yourself actually growing and flourishing and investing in, right? I believe that you got to invest in a place that you actually believe in. It does start with literally having those conversations with the leadership. And if you are not having those conversations, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Once again, as I said, I did not have conversations with a few of the churches that I exited. I had issues with a lot of different things. It did come extremely clear that I was frustrated, but I wasn't bold enough to have certain types of conversations. So I just made an exit. I learned my lesson. And ultimately, when I began to serve at another church, I had conversations before departing from my previous church. And guess what, guys? That is extremely important, because at least you give the pastor or the pastoral team notice that, look, this is a problem. This is how I see it. And then you get to see their perspective. If they agree that it's a problem, then you could give them an opportunity to fix that problem. If they are against you in regards to that particular thing that you have an issue with, that is okay. That is fine. At least you know where they are at, and at least they know where you are at. And it'll be easier for you to properly make godly decisions as it pertains to whether or not you should stick around. So, yes, some of us are called to turn tables. Don't get me wrong. That's why I would not basically tell you just because you are experiencing bad doctrine or the worship is not the way you want it to be or whatever, that you should just leave. No, you should be sensitive to the Spirit, understand what the Spirit of God is saying to you in that particular situation. But most importantly, it just starts with a conversation. Start with a conversation, see where the leadership is at, see what's really going on, and then make your decision from there. Obviously, be prayerful and understand the season. What I mean by that is understand where you are at as it pertains to your season in the things of Christ. That's my take. That's all I got on this one.